And once you're placed on an abuser registry, you cannot work in this field anywhere in Ohio. And that may not seem like that big of a deal because maybe you don't want to work in the DD field any longer. But if you've gone through the hiring process recently, to even qualify to work in our field, we have to do a whole series of background checks, or the employer has to do a series of background checks. And it's not just whether you look on the abuser registry. You look at the nurses registry, nurses age registry, there's one called SAM, there's one that's the high crime portal, there's one that has to do with government grants. There's 7 different ones that we look at. And if you appear on any of those registries, you can't work in our field. So you can bet every one of those fields that are looking at our registry at all as well, which are all required by the Ohio Revised Code. And the same guys that wrote the law that applies to us are the same guys that wrote the law that applies to MH or the Department of Health and all of them. So they all have the same requirements in there. They're all going to want to look at those same backgrounds, and you're going to have the same qualifications. So if you get on the abuser registry, you might as well forget about working in any medical related field whatsoever. And that's for life.
Oh, Dave, can I say something real quick? I should have said this earlier. Cell phones, please put it on vibrate or off. If you have to take a personal phone call emergency, please step out. You miss the presentation up. I should have said that earlier. Sorry about that.
You said that everybody here is grown. They should know that.
True enough, but yet I still should let everybody know what's going on. Sorry, Dave. So please put it on vibrate.
Questions about anything involving MUIs on anything? Yeah, I'm willing to talk about anything. I do the training, like I do the training for the county as well. So I am pretty knowledgeable about the MUI rule and the plans in law enforcement, pretty much the law in general. All right, well, if nobody else has any other questions, if there was anything else you want me to...
That's it. Thank you, Dave. I appreciate it. Yeah, thank you, Dave. I appreciate it. If you put your phones on vibrate, I really appreciate that.
Report. That's all I can stress more than anything else is report. Cover your ass. Yeah.
Thanks, Dave.
Yep.
Next, we got Jason Dewar and John Priest from the Lucas County Board. They're going to come talk to us.
You ready to apply for it? I mean, it's a lovely room.
All over the blown.
I know, you can't, yeah. You want like a 3-minute blower on, or?
Right.
Yeah, you can take a shot. Heat break?
Heat break.
So it's not, is it on yet?
It's on.
Oh, well, then we have to be careful what we say. So, the order of the presentation with the investigator talking first was not really a part of the plan, but it works okay. If you own a cell phone and you know how to use it and you've ever downloaded an app, you can manage the supervision levels and all the stuff we do in our jobs. It's not as complicated as it sounds. The simplest part was, I think about like all the people who get interviewed by the FBI and they don't go to jail for what they did. They go to jail for lying to the FBI, which means if the FBI is going to interview you, I'm going to say no. Like, I'm going to write a note that says, I want a lawyer. Because what you say, what he's saying is, you just report everything. That if John and I are in a home and we are doing a consult with a family and a child is aggressive and we restrain that child and it's not in a plan anywhere, we've got to write an incident report and we have to call that in. And I don't say, okay, you're going to call that in. He's like, I got it. I'm like, okay, he's got it. It's like, no, we're going to do it while we're both in the room so that we see that it occurs, because I'm not going to find out later. He's like, oh, he got busy, or his car wouldn't start, or I forgot to do it, or we just do it. We just both, and sometimes we'll both call it in, which again, there's no harm in that. They're like, yeah, we already heard it. Like, that's fine. So a big chunk of it is just the reporting parts. Now, some of the things that you heard, you really have to fall back to the ISP, because we have an ISP, Individual Service Plan, that outlines supervision for a Tier 3 sex offender. And Tier 1, Tier 2, Tier 3. Tier 3 is you've committed rape, you've been in prison, gross sexual imposition. Gross sexual imposition involves like any sexual contact with an adult and a child being age 15 or under, that anytime that you're forcing someone to have sex, so any of that stuff can get you level 3. Level 3, Tier 3 means you're registering with the Sheriff's Department every 90 days for the rest of your life, okay? So if it's 86 days and you go on vacation, you're still required to register. And there's weird stuff about you might be required to register when you change location. So you need some feedback on that. So even an individual going into respite, if they go into respite and they're going to be there for a long period of time, they may have to re-register where they're at so that the neighborhood can be notified, etc. And does that cause problems? I mean, have we had people who had to move because the neighbors were unfriendly?
Did mommy like it?
Oh yeah, yeah. There's some real issues with that. But it's also the idea to give people fair warning. Because I had an individual who was actually in Wood County, and he called the police on Girl Scouts because a Girl Scout banging on his door and would not leave his porch because she's going to sell him some of these cookies. You know, she's got to sell 40 boxes of cookies. You're going to answer that door. And she's like banging on the door, and he's like, I can't talk to you. I can't talk to you. He called the police to get this girl off the porch because he's registered. It's like, I can't have her on my porch. I'm going to go to jail because this little girl is bound determined to go to camp. And we told him, he said, no, that was the right move. That you're good. Don't open that door. Don't, because anything he does wrong, he knows. He's automatically assumed to be guilty. And that's one of the things we say for these guys. It's like, if he's a registered felon, like, look, you need me to keep an eye on you because you want to witness. I mean, if I go to the mall and I just go in the bathroom and 3 10-year-olds come into the bathroom and they start banging each other around and pushing and shoving, I'm getting done and getting the hell out. Because one of these kids bumps into me while I'm trying to pee, and I pee on him or the floor, and he sees Mr. Dingle. I want to hear this crap about some thing. Oh, this guy showed me his penis. I'm just trying to finish up and get out of here before these clowns run into me because you know his mom's going to go crazy. Everyone's going to think. So it's like, no, I could go, let's check the family bathroom. Maybe it's okay. So a lot of it is just being careful about following the supervision guidelines, but they should be clear. And if they're not clear, you say, what does that mean? You know, if it says something like, you know, be careful around children. I'm sorry, what? What's that mean? Because this individual visits his family and children are present. Well, what we just heard was, would we call CSB? No. His family's aware of his history. That's not the expectation. The expectation is he doesn't have contact with children. So he's not supposed to have them on his lap. He's not supposed to be tickling them. And if he does, you say, you need to step back and stop, and we need to go. And he says, no, I'm not going to go. And you say, that's fine. I'm going to call the police. And they're going to help us go. Because I'm not going to watch you commit a felony and go with you and get the cell next to you. So this isn't going to happen. And I'm going to report that you did this because you're probably done with family visits for a year. Because that's just not going to happen, and they're not going to take. And you have to be, these guys are very, very good. Part of what we talk about, there's this word we use called grooming. Where it's like, you know, I know you've been tight on money, it's been a problem for you. Yeah, and you're tired. Tell you what, I'm watching a movie. Why don't you take a nap? I'm good. I'm just going to watch a movie for a couple hours, rest a little bit, and, you know, it's like, yeah, what happens? And we have people who, if staff fall asleep, especially for female staff, we've had that a couple of times where female staff will fall asleep and wake up and go, well, how did my breast get out? You know, what's going on here? And then you hear this elaborate story about how this, it's like, no, we know this guy does this. We know this happens. And people will try to get your guard down. They'll try to, hey, you like to have a little girl. You must really love her. You got any pictures of her? It's like, you don't want to hear it. You don't want to hear about it. Because the next thing I can do is I can say, you know what I want to do to your daughter? And then you've got to work with that the rest of the time you're working with them. You're going to have to say, hey, I need to go work in a different house because this guy keeps talking about doing stuff with my daughter.
So
I can't work with him
you have
anymore.
to be careful about your conversations, you know, because it's natural, you're changing shifts, whatever, talk about how was the weekend, how were the holidays, oh, my kid's sick, or I got this going on. Because, you know, some of these guys are picking up those details. You know, that's all they've got to do for part of the time. And it's what they think of. So they're collecting that information. And so they're also learning your mannerisms and all that kind of thing to kind of feel you out and probe where the weaknesses are, because that's their areas where they need the most support. So, kind of like what he was talking about. So those are some areas that you have to watch out for.
They can be very sophisticated. We had a gentleman that came out of prison, and I'd never seen this before, but in a day program setting, he was using other clients to set picks. be able to get away with stuff. So he's the staff. He's doing it over here. He's messing with somebody in a wheelchair, and you can't see him. You just can't. And he's waiting, and you can see him. I'm like, I've never seen anyone set picks before to commit offenses. Like, that's really pretty sophisticated. And he would wait until the staff would sit down. And you can't stand all day. You're going to sit down. But the thing you need to do is you sit down nearer to him so that you're on this side, so he's not going to be able to use it. But he literally would wait till the staff would sit down, and then he'd use the position of the other person to set picks. So he just disappeared. You know what's going on over here, and something's going on over here. We had an individual who sexually assaulted another individual on the bus, and when he did it, and he was caught, he said, I waited 9 months. 9 months. I waited to get that. I'm like, okay, that's not good. That's not a good person to work. 9 months he planned and waited for an opportunity. Someone had a seizure, and when both the driver and the aide went to the person with the seizure, he committed the offense. So it is very difficult. I usually do the interview for a lot of these guys before they come out of prison. And I'll say, I want to know about your offenses. And they'll say, well, it's just that one time. I'm like, no, if you're going to lie to me, I'll leave. You can stay longer. They're like, well, there might have been a few other times. And you end up hearing about 40 to 90 other offenses that they were not convicted of. Because when you're looking for someone to have as an intimate friend, they are too. Yours is legal. Theirs is a crime. So they very seldom have one victim. They often have multiple victims and multiple. And the other thing that's difficult is a lot of these guys, and it's mostly guys, were raped as children, were molested as children. We come out of houses where that
It was the culture.
it's part of the culture. It's that mom had sex with dad, who had sex with the kids, who had sex with the neighbors, who had uncles coming in having sex with. The moral foundation is completely turned upside down. So, and they'll say things like, I view what I do to children as a positive experience for them. You're like, no, that's a criminal thinking error. But in their mind, that's what they're saying, because that way they don't feel guilty about what they've done. So, within the ISP, it should say, what's the supervision that the person's supposed to have? Where are they allowed to go? Where are they not allowed to go? Chuck E. Cheese? Probably not. Nickel World? Maybe. But the supervision in Nickel World is going to be real tight if that's someplace they're going. Some people, you have some in-between stuff. You'll say, you can go to a restaurant, but if a busload of kids comes in,
Time to go.
time to go, we're out of here, because otherwise, and that's part of the problem, that kids won't know. So a kid may approach somebody you're with without any understanding of the risk, obviously. They're not wearing orange t-shirts that say offender, so they smile and wink at a kid, the kid's going to respond to them, and you're like, uh-oh, this is going to go bad, and it could go bad fast. You're like, no, we got to go. We just got to go, because there's no way I can supervise this, because this wasn't the plan. But you can also do things like go to McDonald's that don't have playlands, and they don't have it as much as they used to.
Not as much, probably infection risk.
Yeah, disease risk. It's like there's flu in the playland. So
that can also flip too with staff sometimes if you're not really sure about what you're doing. Like when people go out to eat for dinner or go to do things, we try to encourage them to go out to eat the dinner to meet someone. I'm not necessarily having dinner with you. I already ate. You go ahead and have your meal, because if over time they might assume that that's a date. It's like, oh, you take me around town, you take me shopping, we can eat, I've got these things. You smiled at me, maybe that's an invite, So people will misinterpret information and over time maybe assume something that's not. So staff, again, that's another area you kind of have to be careful with and planning and that kind of stuff. So.
And that's an error a lot of men make, just regular guys. One of these, you read magazines and it'll say, if you want to meet women, a really great place is a grocery store. Okay, ladies, do you go to the grocery store looking for men or groceries? My impression is mostly it's groceries. It's about groceries. But guys will look at women, she'll smile and go, Oh yeah. She wants some of this. So right now, this is what it's about. It's like, she's thinking, it's kind of awkward, this guy's staring at me, I just want to get some groceries, and he's thinking, this can happen, this can happen. Maybe I'll follow her home. You're like, no, don't. That she's not interested. And the guys we're talking about that commit sexual offenses, almost everything to them is a go sign. And that's the whole, because you guys have worked with the guy who, what is this? He does this?
Yeah.
Because if you shake his hand, shake my hand, the next one is this, and then it's like, you got a little something up here, and you're like, hey, whoa. And when you read stuff, because I was, as a male, I've not been sexually harassed a great deal. That changed recently. I started working with a guy who, when I work in, we do this take apart thing, we're taking apart washers and dryers. Every time I bend over to pick up a tool, this guy will literally come running up towards me. I'm like, no. Because one day, he's like, I'm working on something, he stands there, he's doing this, and he's getting closer, and he's going, oh. And I said, yeah, no, I don't think so. And then he started to touch me, I'm like, no, back off. And he got pissed. He's like, oh, now you're going to... This was, because he's thinking he's heading to third base, and I'm like, no. But it took me a long time to read it, because I'm like, what's going on? And he grabbed my butt, and he like grabbed my, and I'm like, I think perhaps he wants to guess my weight. This could be some kind of a thing where I can win some kind of prize. But it takes you a moment, you're like, this guy just grabbed, and I asked the guy who runs the place, he's like, oh yeah, he does that sometimes. I'm like, a heads up on that would have been nice. A little pre-warning on that. Now when he steps close, there's a next step that's coming because you might want to get that distance. I had no idea he had this in his history. But now I still have to work with him. And every time I start to like bend over you too, I'm like, where is he? Where is he? Because I'd rather he didn't mount me from behind while I'm, And the truth is, he's not going to be charged with a crime. His intellectual disability is severe enough that he's not culpable. He's not going to be charged with a crime. So you're going to have to position, and that's one of the things that I do differently is I position things now so that I'm not going to have that problem. I'm not going to have it coming up behind me. And I'll say, can you keep, I got to do this part over here, keep him over there until I get this done. Let him look longingly from a distance, but not actually try to get on top of me. It's the beard.
It's a hipster kind of.
Shaving this thing off, man. This is going.
Could you possibly use initials for individuals that we serve with some of your...
Well, MP was the one who had, I went to prison and he had multiple crimes.
I was
multiple. And
I was there for the discharge, on the discharge from it was like a special treatment home. It was the Elvis House. Yeah. As part of it, they all sit in a group with all the people he was in treatment with and the counselor, and they say, part of it was, well, how many offenses did you have? And if you know him, he's like this warm, kind of grandfatherly kind of person. He's like, oh, maybe a couple. And she's like, wasn't it more like 23? Oh yeah, it was that.
Those, you're counting those. See, I was just the 3 part. I was on the 3. Well, and I went and saw him in Marion Correctional. And this is him in Marion Correctional coming in to sit down. Hey, I'm old man, old. And he sits down, old, and you talk to him and stuff. I said, I'd like to see him out in the grounds, because they have the big open courtyard. I mean, you know that because you've seen movies, right? That's the only way we know. And out in the grounds, he's walking, But in there, he's like, oh, I'm so old. I'm like, his physical disability's gone away. But if you see this guy doing this kind of like, oh, you're thinking, I don't have to worry about him. Now, he was in, and while he was in, he was also convicted for conspiracy to commit. Because what he tried to do is like, we work together, we can rape that guy. You hold him down, you go first, I'll go second, and then we'll kill him. And you're like, that was his crime, and that's part of his thing was conspiracy to commit. And when we first put the 2 guys, he and GK, in the same house, we said, don't come in and go, hey, I got paid, I got $200, full tank of gas in my car, and I'm gonna put it in my purse. That's going to be a long shift because they're going to try to overpower you, take that money, that car, and take off. And that's conspiracy to commit. It's trying to get someone else. And the nice thing was the other individual, when the first one did try to conspire, the other one said, and told on him. Because he's like, I'm not going back to prison.
I just got out.
Yeah, I just got out, and they didn't like me lunch there, so I don't want to go back. So he was very good about saying, oh no, that's on him. He's on his own. So though he wasn't a mandated reporter, he still told on the other guy.
An MP is a very disarming person. I mean, before that, he had issues, not with here, but about convincing staff people it would be okay to watch their kids for a little bit. He was the guy who was like, man, you're tired, you've had a rough couple weeks, I know. Go to the store, I'll just sit here and watch a movie, you know.
Or we can take your kids to the store. We can go to the grocery, just go swing by, we'll pick up your kids, you get your grocery shopping done, I'll get mine done, drop your kids at the groceries off, and we're back here.
And we'll also classically group people with gifts. He was hospitalized in a mental hospital for a while, and he was leaving trails of peppermint candies to his room. You know, they would catch it, he'd be like, oh, you got me again, you know, but
He like, thin mints.
the guys would constantly trade things, or I'll do these chores for you over here, you just take a break. And they'd be like, well, he's such a nice guy, he's doing all this stuff for me. You know,
There may be something he's going to need later
Yeah.
Yeah.
that he's going to ask for. And you're like,
You got a question?
Yeah, two questions. The first one is, if, through their history and getting to know the individual, and if their victim is usually children, does that mean that they wouldn't approach an adult?
We have consistently found the bad way that when, in the old days, when people would be put into respite, so they committed offense against a child, people say, oh, they only attack children. They put them into respite like in an ICF, a big facility, and they go after people in wheelchairs. They go, anybody vulnerable, anybody in the category vulnerable. So, and vulnerable is elderly, intellectual disability, sleeping, drunk, passed out, children. All those categories are vulnerable individuals.
It's basically somebody who can't defend themselves.
Yeah, anybody who can, and that's why you'll see, because sometimes you'll see someone who is an offender with someone who's not an offender, but the non-offender is 6'3", 280, and you're like, yeah, I don't think it's going to bother them. And you know, because some people give off what we refer to as nature's warning signs, where we're like, Ernest shook my hand. And I said to John, I think you broke 2 bones in my right hand. I'm pretty sure in my right hand I heard something pop. I think there's 2 bones that were broken in this hand. But I look at Ernest and I think, my head doesn't say, jump him! You know, it just goes, it says, give him your sandwich. I mean, that's why I think in my mind, I'm like, you want my sandwich? You know, that's what I think. So we will put someone who has a history of offending with someone, or even sometimes an individual with autism who just will not be touched. You're like, oh, I wouldn't do that. Yeah, you're like, that would be a bad idea. Don't get too close, because so any combination that makes it safe is what we'll work with. And sometimes we're surprised. The other thing is, many individuals who are sexual offenders also have a history of arson. And you need to be aware of that because there are some restrictions.
Okay.
When we first opened the house on South Street, they had a fire pit in the backyard. We're like, yeah, that can't happen. Because GK had multiple arsons when he was younger. And it was like, if he got mad at you, you might find your porch on fire. You know, you might find a car. And there's a lot of that, you know, that kind of passive-aggressive stuff.
There should be things outlined in your ISPs that will outline other things that are like, ooh, these are precursors to things not going well. You know, he's been having anger issues building for over a week, or maybe a depression kind of thing, where that puts them at a slighter risk, or we know it's on that trail to something bigger in the past. So while it may seem something like not a big deal at the time, for them it may be a really big deal that we might want to head off or prevent or look at. So that's why, you know, pay attention to what's in the ISPs for these guys.
The second question is, do they have the ability to be rehabilitated?
The dream is, yes. And there are some who have. We have an individual who used to have alarms on his door so that if he left his house at night, he had no staff at night, if he left his house at night, it would signal alarm and someone would be sent to his home. He never reoffended. When an individual left out of his house who was listed as a 98% likelihood of reoffense. no indication he's ever offended. It's been 20 years. That there are people where, now usually it takes a period of incarceration, which can be very motivating for individuals who commit crimes to say, I'm not going back there. And that has been, for some, very helpful. The difficulty is if you've been inside for 20 years plus, and you can serve people who've been in 20 years plus, that some of them get pretty comfortable inside so that they don't, it's not a disincentive. Others are such fixated offenders. There's a whole, like 14 different categories of rapists. So the one that you will most often have to deal with is what's called opportunistic. Because that, you know, it's in the news sometimes, but like if you're at your house and you have an ex that still knows how to get in your house, and so let's say 2 in the morning, you're laying in your bed and you feel something plop on the other side of the bed. And you think, well, my kids are here, but that felt bigger than a kid, so I don't think it's one. And you turn the light on, and there's your ex there, drunk out of their mind. And you're like, I just came over, I missed you, you can have sex with me. And you're like, well, I appreciate the offer for the felony, but I'm going to probably pass on that because you're an ex, because we had some kind of a problem. So when you wake up in the morning, this may not go the way, we may not have a pleasant breakfast. It may be, so it's like, nah, you leave that package unopened. Now you're probably not going to be able to get this person downstairs and out, but you're like, leave it wrapped and we'll let it sleep. And in the morning you'll say, no, that didn't happen because that's not going to happen. That's felony, that's an automatic. It's like, well, that's a vulnerable person. And would an individual with a history of sexual offending resist that? Probably not be able. Us, it's like, yeah, no thanks. There are other, I can always go to the grocery store and look for women. There's other ways to deal with that. And so, theoretically, yes, but for many of the individuals we serve, we've seen no indication that they can not respond to opportunity. They can avoid opportunity, they can work with you on that, but if like they're in a family visit and a little kid comes running out of the bathroom naked after bathing, it's like, oh, this is just too much. I mean, you could be off of cocaine for 20 years, but if you walk in the room and there's like 6 big lines of it that says free cocaine, you're like, oh, this is going to be rough. It's like, no, you probably better go. You probably better leave because this is just too much. It's too, you know, and it is an addiction. Once it's established as that's what sex is, that's a real problem. And for some, one of the individuals is not interested in consensual sex. One of the individuals is only interested in, and he's a fixated rapist. He wants to commit rapes. That he's had opportunities to have consenting partners. It will not develop. He's just interested in rape. And that means total supervision forever. Good job security, but yeah, there's probably no chance he's ever going to rehabilitate. We are getting to people a lot younger. We're working with them a lot earlier. Some people literally, it was because they didn't know what consent was. They didn't know, and people will get into situations where they'll begin a sexual interaction and it'll get pretty far advanced and the other person will change their mind. That becomes real difficult to figure out. And you're just like, okay, then just stay apart because you can't clearly have consent. Some of you have done supervision where you've had to be outside of a room, that 2 individuals are engaging in sexual inside the room. And if you hear a big, get off me, then it's knock knock, break it up time. Because either one of them can accuse the other, and either one of them can commit an offense. But if they're both consenting, and the reality is, it's like, well, then we supervise that as well. Just go home at night, you rock yourself to sleep. Okay, I'm gonna be okay. You know, I didn't go to school for this. I'm going to school for this. It's part of the deal. Some of it can be pretty weird. Yeah, but that's also, as John said, you'll see some of the stuff developing over time. That for one of the individuals who didn't reoffend, he started to have a special relationship with a nephew, and he told us about that. And we contacted the family, and they shut it down, and it didn't ever turn into anything else. So, but he actually told us, because I think he was starting to get uncomfortable with it. It's like, it's getting too close to special friendship, and then special friendship, special favors, and then grooming. actual contact. So, in the ISPs that are in the home somewhere, we assume that they're in there, you can use highlighters and mark the parts that you need to be especially careful of, because when you look through an ISP, it'll have things like, needs help tying shoes. You probably don't have to mark that one. The supervision around children, going to want to highlight that one. Know things to start fires. So if an individual is not supposed to have that, offers to light your cigarette with his lighter, that could be a problem. You're like, oh yeah, you're not really supposed to have that. How about you give that up? Because that could be a problem. So you can mark them so that you know the most important things. We did that for transportation services for years within the county board, because if you're an aide getting on a bus, how are you supposed to be trained on 12 plans like that? We just say, these are things you need to be aware of. Helping this individual with his seatbelt, you need him to lean all the way back. You need to move down to do it, because if you don't, and you do it like this, it's going to bite you in the arm. So, there are ways to do. They're approaching people and how you help them. If he wants me to tie a shoe, then put it right up here. But I'm not getting down here. This is not the place to be. This is a much better place to be. You sit down, you put your foot up, I'll tie your shoe.
And I'm glad you're touching on that, because sometimes even in plans, and you're not going to know, you may not know how to work with an individual, where the staff member is supposed to be when they're walking down the street, where, when you're going through a door, how staff's supposed to do that. And I don't know if you did touch on a couple of them, but.
Or you're at an event, and Special Olympics or somewhere else, and like, well, we got it. But you also know that you're also there to support and maintain supervision, because I've had guys in track, they get to the far end of the track and people are busy over there, and the staff person's maintain their supervision from the parking lot in the car, find the best place, and he sneaks off with somebody in the bathroom on the other end of the track. So
the assumption is you got to be relatively close. One of the things we wrote in our outline is a lot of the stuff can be found in the ISP. Some things can't. So the physical layout of where you land can't. I mean, you're not going to know until you get there. And if you walk into a place that has, 13 rooms on each side, each with their own door, and those doors locked, if that guy walks in, closes the door, and locks it, you're locked out, you've got a problem. And so that's one where if we're going into a room, and you say, if we're going in a room, I'm going in first. Because you're not going in a room without me. And if that's not okay, we can leave. Because you're not keeping me in trouble. I'm not.
If I gotta go to the bathroom, you're coming with me.
Yeah, that we're going to be in there together. Because I need to know where you are. Not just because I'm an asshole. I'm trying to keep you out of trouble. You need a witness. You want a witness at all times. You want me as a witness to say, no, I was with him. He didn't do that. I was within 5 feet of him. That didn't happen. Because that also happens as well. People get accused of things. So I'm selling it generally in the idea of I'm going to keep you safe because I'm the witness to say it didn't happen because I got my eyes on you. And there are people here who'll burn you down, so you want me to keep an eye on you. You want me to say, no, that didn't happen. It's kind of like the guy calling the police on the Girl Scout. It's like, get her off my porch. I know if she gets in my house, I'm going somewhere bad. I want nothing to do with that, and I want him on my side. Yeah.
I had an experience like this with like say like a baseball game, football game or something, and like how the seats is, and you get like a assigned seat with your ticket.
Right.
Say like this side, or like say if it's kids on both sides or something, you like offended, or like say it's like two families on both sides, you just leave.
I'd get up, I'd say, because the issue is there anywhere else you can go? I mean, if I wanted to see the game, and I'm with the guy to see the game, and there's open seats somewhere else, I'm going to get up, I'm going to go to an usher or somebody and say, look, we can't sit among those kids. We got legal things that says we can't. Can we sit up there? Can we sit somewhere where there aren't any kids? And they're like, yeah, they'll reseat you. Because most people will work with you if you say something. Now, if you just go up there and sit in those seats, then you may have a problem because you're not supposed to be there. But if you say, this isn't going to work for us, that we can't have kids real close, that they should work with you. And then if they won't, they can't, you're like, then we're leaving.
Standing room only, or we're out. So.
Yeah. Yeah.
But the only thing we didn't hit on too was the technology. I mean, some guys have media restrictions, technology restrictions, and like even here, I mean, once guys get to work, they're shooting each other texts or emails and pictures and all kinds of stuff. Some guys aren't supposed to have, you know, certain content, obviously, like child-oriented content or maybe violent-oriented content or that kind of stuff. Usually they have a designated person that they sit down with weekly or whatever that helps review their stuff, but they may have restrictions on certain materials. There's reasons for that.
And that's one too, if they have like a designated talker or someone who reviews like their phone or stuff to check for things, because one of the things you'll see is they'll use their phone and they'll take pictures of kids, of people's kids, and you're like, yeah, that's not okay, they're not supposed to do that. And you can't really easily disable that part of the phone, but if you see it happening, you interrupt it and you say, whoever the designated person is, you notify them they need to clean it out. It's got stuff, because it's not illegal to take pictures of other people's children. But you know what they're going to do with those pictures is not good, so they need to clean it out because it moves them towards offending. So it's one of those things that you'd probably write it up as an insert, because you might say the next time we go out, you leave your phone at home. You don't need it, I have mine. If we need to call for an emergency or something, I got it covered. So we might change ISP and put that in if that were a problem persistently, but it's going to be awkward at times. And we're running into more of a problem because some of the programs that will block certain images, pornography, and other stuff, that we're seeing more and more stuff where you'll get like the beginning of a video is just people talking or cooking, and then it's pornography, and then it's talking cooking again. So they're embedding it within larger things, which makes it pretty hard to detect. So if you're looking at it and you're like, oh, it's a cooking show, no big deal. And then you turn your back and you do something that goes, it's like, go, unless it's biscuits and gravy, you shouldn't be hearing that sound. You turn around and it's something else, and it's like, okay, that's an embed, where they've got one where they bookended it. I'm like, I'm not that sophisticated, but I can certainly hear it and catch it.
There's some similar themes too. I know we've had, you know, a guy, RS, who at times will turn on BCS and it's like, oh look, it's high school tennis, or you know something like that. I'm just gonna sit back and watch it. It's one of those things where you're not necessarily gonna wrestle him and jump on him on the TV, and that becomes a grenade because that can create other issues. You can certainly have verbal redirection, like, you know, I've read before, this is not a good thing for you. Didn't you have legal issues and things in the past, and things like that? He's telling you, you're still writing that stuff up and noting it, so it can occur. You're still calling somebody and saying, look, I tried to talk to him, he's still making this choice. I just want to make it known. But we're going to write up so we know things are still active. Because we have some people where we have to keep restrictions in place, but in order to keep those restrictions in place,
you got to prove there's a reason.
We have to prove there's a reason. So if we don't write that stuff down, and we don't have anything, it makes it hard to keep that stuff in place, to detect it. So.
Any questions?
Would you say all of them have cues to watch for, or?
No, because the individual waited 9 months, had no cues other than opportunity.
Yeah.
And there was 0 cues. There was gloating afterwards, but there was no cues ahead of time. And that's what makes it especially hard sometimes. That's also the conspiracy to commit stuff, that the conspiracy could be going on and you wouldn't be aware of it until the attempt is made to either overpower you, or you'll hear something like, get him. You know, don't be so get him.
Now.
Yeah, now? What?
Yeah, I even had
rush the door. I mean, that the juvenile facilities more so than what you guys do, but like down in Columbus at Tico, they would once or twice a year rush a door, and they would have a signal set, and they would go, and staff would get hurt, and it was ugly.
I had one person wait like 2 years once, so yes.
There are some times, not all the time, where you will see cues. Perfect example would be with NP. He'll tell you he has goosebumps. Okay, that's not like his only cue, but that's history has shown that is one of them. With GK, he will be extra nice, buy gifts. MP does the same thing. He'll buy candy, things like that. And with RS, and this dates back for those of you that have been with us for a while, we were in Orlando. I don't know if you guys remember that particular incident, where he was very attracted to one of the female staff, and you will see him become upset if anybody is interacting with that individual, if anybody's getting close to that individual, you will start to see things, and that's when we found knives and everything else on this person. You have, while they're right, you won't always have cues, but those three gentlemen that I just mentioned, they do have some.
Or if they ask for Christmas, if they ask for duct tape, some rope, it won't be that obvious, but we did have one of the individuals who had duct tape and some rope, and that was the plan. It was part of the plan. You're like, that's an unusual package.
That specific person, one of the cues for him is when he's being really nice to people, because he's normally kind of to himself, maybe a little antisocial.
Which one?
RS. But when he starts like being really nice to people and smiling a lot and stuff.
Or you can understand what he's saying.
Being clearly.
Yeah, it speaks incredibly
It is
clearly.
one.
Yeah.
It's like, wow, he just bought pop or something. He said, yeah, that's the time to know. And two, if it's not the ISP, it's something that's a little different or off, or you're unclear about, that's the time to call somebody and ask, what does this mean, or this is going on, and I haven't seen that before.
Because there's a lot of times where it's,
I can't hear you.
You gotta speak a little bit more.
I got a cold when I saw my time.
So there are situations with an offender where or sometimes you have more staff. In the homes when we had recently in South Street, we had 2 or 3 staff? 2 staff most of the time.
2 step and then one-on-one, so it was 3
Yeah,
times.
and if there were activities, it'd be one-on-one. So it's staffed heavy enough that if it's not safe or doesn't feel safe, say something about that, and we'll figure out how to make it safe. The reality is, there's always going to be some limitations on how many staff. You're not going to get more than one-on-one. Although there are a few people who do get more than one-on-one, it's unusual. And for these guys, part of the problem is it's not a constant risk. It's a risk that comes and gets worse and then kind of goes away and comes back.
2 more things. An individual that doesn't have the label, JB, an older gentleman that greets you by the little hand, you know what I'm talking about. If you start seeing pictures with balloons attached to it, not physical balloons, but like a picture of a female with a balloon, and it's, look, Amanda, I drew a picture of you. The neighbor's going to be in trouble, okay? So that's one of his cues. Another thing is, if we talk to the all staff in January, Kathy's working currently on new documentation sheets. We talked about that. One of the pieces within that is there's 3 or 4 categories. There's 4 categories that will kind of touch on a few things. Because what happens is, back in the day, and 2 guys up there know this, ISPs would be like that thick sometimes. Maybe not that thick, but they would be really thick. And they would have a lot of history in there. And over the years, some of that gets taken out. And one of them, and I don't even know if it's Jim Bum, in his plan anymore, where about the balloons. I don't know if that's in the plan. But that would be our specialized training with those 4 different sections, which is behavioral supports, medical, financial, and history. So,
Yeah, and there's some stuff you want to know in there, because there's some other things that happen with, for example, raw meat
yeah.
and food stuff, and you're going to want to know.
Yeah, you're going to want to know that.
Yeah, there's
He's the guy
unusual.
who's always probing. I used to take him out for lunch when I was based at Lott Hill, where he was at. Sometimes we drive him down the street, apartment buildings, they like to advertise, they have openings, so they put the big balloons up, and he's like, hey! And I'm like, I'm not talking about how'd you know? What? But it's like I already knew where he was going to go with that. He just wanted to see if I was going to say something. But
And because the situation has improved, the environment's improved, the Programming's improved. He's not actively hurting people now. But if you go back 15 years, he would say at Hill, see that weapon, that's the tool over there? I'm going to hit that guy in a wheelchair before the end of the day, and you can't stop.
Shot.
And he would do it, and he would achieve that. And it was very difficult. And he would go to court, and the court would say, he'd go to court, one of his classic moves was, he went to court, he'd take the candy bar, he'd start eating it, he'd drool a whole bunch, go into court, the judge would say, he's incompetent to stand trial, get him out of my court. He'd come out and he'd say, you can't touch me. And what we did was we created basically parole in the community with the restrictions so that he'd have less freedom, and it worked over time. But yeah, it was when I first came into the county board, they would have in the workshops, they'd have hammers on the desks, claw hammers. I'm like, do you think maybe we could drill a hole in the handle, tie those down? You'd have people go to lunch with their hammers in their pocket and get in an argument, and you're the staff going, okay, there's two guys squaring off with hammers. Step between them. I'm like, can I get a helmet? You know, something? And so they tie them down now. A lot of the stuff changed, but it took years to get it to be safer. That the old days was a little Wild West. It's much more controlled, and a lot of it is now just catching it early and reporting it before it develops any momentum. And then everybody pretty much stays safe. There will be things that happen. If I'm walking with him and we're walking and he runs up and touches a child, I'm going to get him off the kid, I'm going to report it, but I'm not liable for him having done that. I can't predict what he's going to do. I can't make that not happen. I can be there, I can intervene, I can report it, we can call the police, I can say, if you want, ma'am, we can call the police right now and he might be arrested for touching your child. What do you want to do? Because that's a legitimate thing, and that's how I'm going to have, but I can't. They took off towards somebody, I can't. I didn't know that was going to happen. And I was not paying attention, I'm right next to him. But, you know, and there's nothing you can do. If you walk around a corner and there's a naked 9-year-old with 2 handfuls of balloons, you know you've got people that's going to be a problem with. You're like, okay, well, you wouldn't have expected that to happen, but it develops. You can't, you're at a McDonald's, and again, a bus full of kids comes in. You're like, well, I wasn't planning on that. Now you're going to deal with it, though. You're not going to say, well, let's see how it goes. Yeah, we don't really do. We're like, no, let's see us go. Because you just know it's going to go bad. Yeah. Bag it up. We'll eat it later. Okay? If you need us to come back, let us know. We love being out.
Thank you, Jason. Thank you, John. I appreciate it coming.